She said it like it meant nothing, like it was a line she'd rehearsed in the mirror. It's just one dinner with my ex, Ethan. Don't make it weird. I remember the way she said my name, soft but tired, like I was the problem she had to manage instead of the man she married 7 years ago. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood there in our kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence between us, and watched her reach for her purse like this was any other Tuesday night. That was the moment I knew something had shifted, not loud, not dramatic, just a quiet crack running through something I used to think was solid. Olivia had always been good with words, that was her job, marketing campaigns, brand messaging, selling stories people wanted to believe, and for a long time, I was one of those people. I believed her when she said late nights were just deadlines, when she said the distance between us was just stress, when she said we were fine. But there's a difference between what someone says and what they show you when they think you're not paying attention. The phone turned face down at dinner. The extra time getting ready in the morning. The way she checked herself in the mirror before leaving for a casual meeting. Small things. Easy to ignore if you want peace more than truth. I used to. That night I didn't. She moved through the house like she owned the moment, heels clicking softly against hardwood, perfume trailing behind her, something new, sharper, not the one I bought her last Christmas. I leaned against the counter, arms folded, and asked one question, calm, steady, the way a man asks when he already knows the answer doesn't matter. Where? She paused for half a second, just long enough to register, then smiled, that polished, easy smile that used to disarm me. Just a place downtown. It's nothing. Nothing. That word hung in the air longer than it should have. Nothing doesn't require that kind of effort. Nothing doesn't make your wife look at her reflection twice before walking out the door. I nodded once, like I accepted it, like I was still the same man who took things at face value. But inside, something had already gone. Quiet. Not anger. Not jealousy. Just clarity. Because here's the truth most men learn too late, it's not the dinner that matters. It's what someone is willing to risk for it. She grabbed her keys, gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, light, distracted, already halfway out the door. Don't wait up, she said. The door clicked shut behind her, and just like that, the house felt bigger, emptier, like it had shifted sides without telling me. I stood there for a minute, listening to the silence settle, then I reached for my phone. I didn't call her. I didn't text. I opened a different contact. Because if this was just one dinner, I was going to make sure it was the last one she ever underestimated. I waited exactly 60 seconds after her car pulled out of the driveway before I moved, not because I needed the time, but because timing matters when you want control, and control was the only thing I cared about now, so I walked back into the kitchen, picked up my phone, and scrolled to the contact I had not used in over a year, a name most people would not think twice about, but one that still opened doors when I needed it to. Daniel Mercer, general manager of a place downtown that did not show up on casual searches, the kind of restaurant where reservations were not just booked, they were arranged, and when he answered, his voice carried that same calm professionalism I remembered. Ethan, it has been a while. And I kept my tone even, the same way I had kept it with Olivia. I need a table tonight. There was a pause, not hesitation, just calculation. We are fully booked, he said, and I almost smiled, because that was exactly what I expected. I am not asking for a table. I replied. I am asking for control of one. Silence again, heavier this time, then a quiet exhale. What do you need? And that was when the plan stopped being an idea and became something real, something structured. I gave him the time, described the couple without using names, brunette, early 30s, confident posture, the kind of man who leans in too close when he talks. Daniel did not ask questions he did not need answers to, he never did, he just said, I will handle it. And that was enough. I ended the call and set the phone down on the counter, the house still quiet around me. But it felt different now, like the silence was working with me instead of against me. I walked into the living room and looked at the framed photos on the wall, vacations, birthdays, the version of us that looked effortless from the outside, and I tried to remember the last time it actually felt that way, but nothing came. Just a series of moments that made more sense now than they did back then, the late replies, the distracted smiles, the way she stopped asking about my day and started answering questions I never asked. I picked up my keys and headed out, not rushing, not hesitating, just moving forward the way you do when the decision has already been made. The drive downtown took about 20 minutes, traffic light, the city glowing the way it always does after sunset, clean, polished, almost convincing. I parked a block away and stepped out, adjusting my jacket, not because I cared how I looked, but because details matter, and tonight was going to be built on details. I was not there to confront, not there to argue, not even there to prove anything. I was there to watch a story unfold that I had already written, because while Olivia thought she was walking into something simple, something harmless, I had already turned it into something else entirely. Something she would not see coming until it was too late to pretend it was nothing. And as I reached the corner and caught sight of the restaurant entrance, valet lights reflecting off polished glass, I checked the time once, calm, steady, and stepped forward like a man who knew exactly how the night was going to end. I did not go inside right away because control starts before the first step, so I stayed across the street for a moment, watching the entrance through the reflection of a darkened window, the kind of glass that lets you see everything without being seen. And right on time, Olivia's car pulled up to the valet, smooth, confident, like she had done this before, maybe not here, but somewhere, enough to know how to move without hesitation. She stepped out, heels touching pavement with that same quiet precision I had heard in our hallway, her dress simple but deliberate, nothing flashy, just enough to suggest effort without admitting it, and then a second car pulled in behind her, black, clean, the kind of car a man drives when he wants to be noticed without saying it out loud. Ryan Blake stepped out a second later, taller than I remembered from the one photo I had seen years ago, relaxed posture, easy smile. The kind that comes from believing the situation is already in your favor. He walked up to her like there was no gap to bridge, like time had not passed, and she smiled back, not polite, not distant, but familiar, and that was enough. I did not need more than that, not proof, not confirmation, just pattern, because patterns tell you more than words ever will. I crossed the street then, slow, measured, not hiding, just not announcing myself, and by the time I reached the entrance, they were already inside. The host greeting them with the kind of warmth reserved for guests who matter. I stepped through the doors a few seconds later, the low hum of conversation, soft lighting, glass and silver catching reflections from every angle, and Daniel was already there, waiting just off to the side, not obvious, not formal, just present. He gave me a small nod, nothing more, and that was all the acknowledgement we needed. No introductions, no explanations, just execution. He led me past the main floor without a word, through a narrow corridor that most guests would never notice, into a private section with a clear view of the dining room below, not hidden, just elevated, a better angle, a better position, and from there, I could see everything. Olivia and Ryan seated near the center, close enough to be seen, far enough to feel private, their table already set, wine poured within minutes, the rhythm of the evening moving exactly as expected. I leaned lightly against the railing, arms relaxed, watching without tension, because this was not about catching them doing something wrong, it was about letting them believe nothing was wrong at all. Ryan leaned forward as he spoke, confident, comfortable. Olivia mirrored him without realizing it, small gestures, slight tilts of the head, the kind of body language people fall back into when history is still alive under the surface. Their laughter came easy, too easy for something that was supposed to be nothing, and every few minutes, her phone lit up on the table, face down at first, then eventually turned over, notifications ignored, except for one, mine, still unread, still sitting there like a question she did not want to answer. I did not send another message. I did not need to, because the silence was doing more work than any words could. Daniel stepped beside me quietly after a while, his voice low, controlled. "Everything is in place," he said, and I nodded once, eyes still on the table below, because this was where most people would make a mistake, step in too early, reveal too much, lose the advantage, but I was not most people. I had already decided how this night would unfold, and right now, this part, the waiting, the watching, the illusion of control they thought they had. This was exactly where I wanted them, comfortable enough to forget that someone else was writing the ending. The first course arrived exactly 12 minutes after they sat down, not rushed, not delayed, just precise, because timing creates rhythm and rhythm creates comfort, and comfort was what I needed them to feel. Ryan lifted his glass slightly as the server placed their plates, saying something that made Olivia smile in that quiet, contained way she used when she wanted to seem unaffected, but I could see it from where I stood. The slight lean forward, the way her shoulders relaxed, the kind of ease that does not happen with strangers, and that was when the first adjustment happened, subtle enough that neither of them questioned it. Their original table, reserved under Ryan's name, had been reassigned just minutes before they arrived, a small, technical issue Daniel's team handled without friction, moving them to a better position, more visible, more exposed, without ever making it feel like a downgrade. In fact, Ryan looked pleased, like he had been upgraded, like the night was already working in his favor, and that was the point, because people reveal more when they think they are winning. I watched as he spoke, hands moving just enough to emphasize confidence, his tone measured, practiced, the kind of man who had done this before, not necessarily with Olivia, but with women like her, women who appreciate attention wrapped in familiarity. Olivia listened, occasionally brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, a gesture I had seen 1,000 times, but never like this. Never directed at someone else, and still, I did not move, I did not interrupt, because interruption breaks illusion, and I needed the illusion intact for just a little longer. Daniel stepped closer again, his voice barely above a whisper. "The second phase is ready," he said, and I nodded once, because everything so far had been exactly as planned, the lighting, the pacing, even the distance between tables, nothing random, nothing accidental. I checked my watch, not because I was impatient, but because precision matters, and right on cue, a different server approached their table, not the one who had been handling them all night. This one carried a small tablet, discreet, professional, the kind used for confirming specialty orders or billing adjustments. He leaned slightly toward Ryan, speaking just loud enough for Olivia to hear. "Sir, there is a quick confirmation needed for your reservation details." Ryan frowned for a fraction of a second, not concerned, just curious. He took the tablet, glanced at the screen, then his expression shifted, not dramatically, just enough, tightening around the eyes, a pause that lasted a beat too long. Olivia noticed it too, her smile fading just slightly as she leaned in. "Everything okay?" she asked, casual on the surface, but with that underlying tension people try to hide when something feels off. Ryan forced a small laugh, handing the tablet back. "Yeah, just a mix-up, nothing serious." But I could see it, the crack, small but real, because the name on that reservation was not just his, it was linked, quietly, to another account, another booking history, patterns that did not match the story he was presenting tonight. And while Olivia did not know what she had just seen, she felt it, that subtle shift in energy, the kind you cannot explain but cannot ignore either, and that was the first real moment of imbalance, not enough to end the night, not enough to cause a scene, but enough to plant doubt, and doubt, once planted, does not stay still. I remained where I was, calm, steady, watching it take root, because this was not about one moment, it was about layering moments until the truth revealed itself without me ever having to say a word. The doubt did not explode, it settled, slow and quiet, like a weight Olivia could not quite name, and that was exactly how it was supposed to work, because sudden shocks make people defensive, but subtle shifts make them question, and questioning was where control began to slip. I watched her lean back slightly, eyes lingering on Ryan longer than before, not with admiration now, but with calculation. The kind people do when something stops adding up, and Ryan felt it, even if he did not fully understand it yet. His posture adjusted, just a fraction, shoulders tightening, his smile coming a second too late, and that delay told me everything, because confident men do not hesitate unless something underneath them moves. The server returned with their second course, smooth, uninterrupted, placing plates with the same practice rhythm, but this time there was a small addition, a folded card beside Ryan's setting. Nothing dramatic, just a detail that did not belong to a standard dinner service. He noticed it immediately, fingers brushing the edge before he opened it, and for a brief second, his expression dropped again, more noticeable this time, not panic, not even fear, just recognition, like he had seen something he did not expect to see here, in this context. Olivia leaned in again, her voice lower now. "What is it?" she asked, and Ryan shook his head slightly, forcing a dismissive tone. "It is nothing, probably just a mistake." But his hand stayed on the card a moment. Longer than it should have, like letting go would make it real. Olivia did not push, but she did not fully relax either, her attention divided now between him and the space around them, her instincts catching up to something her mind had not fully processed, and that was when the second layer of the plan started to take shape. Because doubt alone is not enough, it needs direction. I reached into my pocket and sent a single message, not to Olivia, but to a number I knew would reach the right place, a simple confirmation, nothing emotional, nothing revealing, just a trigger, and within minutes, the atmosphere at their table shifted again, subtle but undeniable. The manager approached this time, not Daniel, but someone dressed the part, composed, professional, carrying the kind of authority that makes people pay attention without raising his voice. He addressed Ryan directly, polite, controlled. "Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but there is a small issue with your account on file that needs clarification." Ryan's jaw tightened, just slightly, the kind of reaction you miss if you are not looking for it. But I was. Olivia's eyes moved between them, her expression no longer relaxed, no longer certain, and in that moment, the narrative she had built for herself, that this was just a harmless dinner, just a conversation with someone from the past, began to fracture, not because of anything I said, not because of a confrontation, but because reality was quietly rewriting the story in front of her. Ryan stood halfway, then sat back down, choosing to keep control of the situation, or at least appear to. "Can we handle it later?" he asked, voice still steady, but thinner now. The manager nodded politely. "Of course, sir, we will follow up shortly," and stepped away, leaving behind a silence that felt heavier than before. Olivia broke it first, her voice careful now, measured. "What kind of issue?" she asked, and this time, Ryan did not have a smooth answer ready. He hesitated, just long enough for the truth to begin showing through the cracks, and I watched it all from above, calm, still, because this was the moment where perception shifts, where doubt becomes awareness, and once that happens, nothing goes back to the way it was before. Silence stretched across the table, not loud, not dramatic, but heavy in a way that made every small movement feel amplified, the kind of silence that forces people to fill it even when they do not know how. And Olivia shifted first, her fingers lightly brushing the edge of her glass, not drinking, just grounding herself in something physical while her eyes stayed locked on Ryan, waiting, measuring, and Ryan knew it. He could feel the expectation pressing in, because whatever confidence he walked in with was no longer carrying him the same way. "It is nothing serious," he said finally, his tone controlled but thinner now, like he was choosing each word instead of letting them come naturally. "Just a mix-up with their system." But even as he said it, he avoided her eyes for a fraction of a second, and that was enough, because people who tell the truth do not need to look away. Olivia caught it. Not consciously maybe, but instinctively, her posture straightened slightly, her expression settling into something quieter, more reserved, the kind of look she used when she was processing information she did not like, and the distance between them, small as it was, started to grow in ways neither of them could fully control. I watched it happen in real time, the shift from comfort to caution, from familiarity to uncertainty, and I did not move, because this part, the unraveling, needed space. Ryan tried to recover, leaning back, forcing a small smile, steering the conversation back to safer ground, shared memories, old stories, things designed to rebuild the connection they had walked in with, but it did not land the same way anymore. Olivia responded, but slower, her reactions measured, her attention split between what he was saying and what she was starting to question, and that was when the final layer began, not loud, not obvious, just precise. The server returned again, this time with the check presenter placed gently on the table, earlier than expected, a detail that immediately stood out. Ryan frowned, confusion crossing his face as he reached for it. "We have not finished," he said, a slight edge in his voice now, not aggressive, just unsettled. The server remained calm. "Professional." "Of course, sir, this is just a preliminary summary due to the account flag. You may continue your meal." And stepped back, leaving the folder sitting there like something unavoidable. Ryan hesitated, then opened it, and this time, the reaction was not subtle. His jaw tightened, his shoulders stiffened, the kind of physical response that cannot be hidden. Olivia leaned in again, closer than before, her voice low but firm. "Ryan, what is going on?" And this time, there was no easy answer waiting, because the numbers in front of him, the records, the linked accounts, the inconsistencies, they were not things you could explain away with a casual excuse, not when someone was paying attention, and Olivia was paying attention now, fully, completely. The version of her that walked into that restaurant, relaxed and certain, was gone, replaced by someone trying to understand what she had stepped into, and from where I stood, everything was exactly where it needed to be, not exposed, not yet, but close, because the truth does not need to be forced when it is already rising to the surface on its own. And all I had to do was let it reach the point where it could no longer be ignored. Ryan did not close the folder right away, and that hesitation said more than anything he could have explained, his fingers resting on the edge like he was deciding whether to face it or pretend it did not exist. And Olivia saw it, really saw it this time, not the version of him he had been presenting all night, but the version that slips through when control starts to break. "Ryan," she said again, quieter now but sharper, the kind of tone that does not ask twice, and he finally looked up at her, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. "It is just a billing issue," he repeated, but the repetition itself made it weaker, like saying it again would somehow make it true. Olivia leaned back slightly, creating space, not physically large but emotionally significant, her eyes moving between him and the folder still open on the table, and then she did something she had not done all night. She reached for it herself, not aggressively, not accusing, just calmly pulling it closer, and Ryan's reaction was immediate, subtle but unmistakable. His hand moved as if to stop her, then paused halfway, unsure whether he had the right to, and that moment of hesitation gave her all the permission she needed. She opened it fully, her gaze scanning the contents, and I watched her expression shift in real time, not dramatic, not explosive, just a quiet tightening around the eyes, the kind that comes when something you assumed was simple becomes complicated in a way you did not expect. "What is this?" she asked, and this time there was no softness left in her voice, just clarity. Ryan leaned forward, lowering his tone, trying to contain the situation. "It is nothing you need to worry about," he said, but that line landed differently now, because telling someone not to worry is the fastest way to make them question everything. Olivia did not look at him right away. She kept her eyes on the page a second longer, absorbing whatever she was seeing, and then she looked up, not confused anymore, but focused. "Why is your name linked to multiple reservations under different accounts?" she asked, direct, precise, and for the first time that night, Ryan did not have an immediate answer. His mouth opened slightly, then closed, the silence stretching just long enough to make it real, and that was the moment the balance shifted completely, not because of anything loud or obvious, but because the story he had been telling her could not hold its shape anymore. He tried to recover, of course he did, leaning back, running a hand through his hair, offering a partial explanation, something vague about business, about clients, about shared accounts, but the words did not carry the same weight, not when the evidence in front of her told a different story. Olivia listened, but she was no longer following, she was evaluating, and that difference changes everything. I stayed where I was, watching it unfold without interference, because stepping in now would have been unnecessary. The truth was already doing its job, layer by layer, revealing itself without force. Daniel moved beside me again, his presence quiet, almost invisible. "Do you want to proceed?" he asked, and I took a slow breath, eyes still fixed on the table below, because this was the turning point, the moment where most people would either walk away or escalate, but I had planned for something else entirely. Something cleaner, something final. "Not yet," I said calmly, because the most powerful move is not the one that interrupts, it is the one that lands when there is no room left for denial. And down below, Olivia closed the folder gently, not slamming it, not reacting with anger, just setting it down like she had already reached a conclusion she did not need to announce. And in that quiet gesture, I knew the night had already changed in a way either of them could undo. Olivia did not pick the conversation back up where it left off, and that silence was louder than anything she could have said. She simply reached for her glass, took a slow sip, and set it down with a level of control that told me she had already shifted from participant to observer. And once someone makes that shift, the outcome is only a matter of time. Ryan felt it immediately, the change in her energy, the distance in her eyes, and he tried to bridge it, leaning forward again, softening his tone. "Olivia, listen, it is not what it looks like." But that line came too late, because explanations only work before doubt becomes evidence, not after. She did not interrupt him, she let him speak, which made it worse, because when someone stops arguing and starts listening, it means they are no longer trying to be convinced, they are just confirming what they already suspect. And Ryan kept going, offering details, fragments of a story that tried to reshape what she had seen into something harmless, something manageable, but every sentence felt like it was being built on unstable ground, and Olivia saw it. Her responses minimal now, short, controlled. "Then explain it clearly," she said at one point, her voice calm but firm, and that calmness carried more weight than any anger would have. Ryan hesitated again, and that hesitation stretched just long enough to make the truth undeniable. I watched it all without moving, because this was the moment I had been waiting for, not the exposure, not the confrontation, but the realization, the exact point where Olivia understood that the version of the night she believed in when she walked in no longer existed. Daniel stepped beside me once more, his voice quiet. "It is ready." And this time, I nodded because there was nothing left to build, the foundation had already cracked, and now it was time to finish it cleanly. I took my phone out and sent one final message, simple, direct, and within seconds the manager returned to their table, composed as always. But this time there was a slight shift in tone, a formality that signaled something more definitive. "Sir, ma'am," he began, "we do need to resolve the account discrepancy before continuing service." And this time, there was no option to delay. Ryan's expression tightened, frustration starting to surface beneath the control he had been trying to maintain. "I said we would handle it later," he replied, a hint of edge in his voice now. But the manager did not move, did not react, just held his position calmly. "I understand, sir, but due to the nature of the discrepancy, we cannot proceed without clarification." And that was it, the line drawn without raising volume, without creating a scene. Just a boundary that could not be ignored. Olivia looked at Ryan then, not with confusion, not with curiosity, but with clarity, the kind that settles in when everything finally makes sense in a way you did not want it to. And she leaned back in her chair, creating space again, more deliberate this time. "You should take care of that," she said, her voice even, detached, and in that moment, the connection they walked in with was gone, replaced by something colder, something distant, and Ryan knew it, he could feel it slipping, but there was nothing he could do to pull it back, because whatever control he thought he had over the situation had already been taken from him long before he realized it. And as I stood there, watching the final pieces fall into place, I knew the night had reached the point where nothing else needed to be said, not by me, not by anyone, because sometimes the strongest move is not confrontation. It is letting the truth stand on its own, undeniable and complete. Ryan did not argue after that, not really, he just sat there for a second longer than necessary, like a man realizing the room had shifted without him, and then he stood, slow, controlled, trying to salvage whatever dignity he had left. "I will take care of it," he said, more to himself than to Olivia, and she did not stop him, did not follow, she simply nodded once, a small, decisive motion that closed the space between what this night was supposed to be and what it had become. He walked away with the manager, disappearing into the corridor I had passed through earlier, and just like that, she was alone at the table. The same table that had felt warm and inviting an hour ago now looked different, colder, more exposed, and Olivia sat there in that silence, her posture still composed, but her eyes no longer searching for answers, just settling into the reality in front of her. I watched her for a moment longer, not with anger, not with satisfaction, just with clarity, because this was never about catching her in something dramatic, it was about showing her exactly what she had chosen to step into. And then I moved, not rushed, not hesitant, just steady, down the corridor. Through the main floor, past the quiet hum of conversations that had nothing to do with us, and when I reached her table, she looked up before I said a word, her expression shifting, surprise first, then something quieter, something more complicated. "Ethan," she said, my name landing differently now than it had in the kitchen earlier, and I pulled out the chair across from her and sat down, calm, composed, the same way I had been all night. "You said it was just dinner," I said, my voice even. Not accusing, not emotional, just stating what had already been established. She held my gaze, and for a second, I could see the layers in her expression, the justification she had walked in with, the doubt that had grown, and now the understanding settling in. "It was supposed to be," she replied, and that word supposed to carried more weight than anything else she could have said. I nodded once, because I believed her in that moment, not the intention, but the expectation. "That is the thing. About decisions," I said quietly. "They are never just what we say they are." She looked down briefly, then back up, her composure still there, but different now, less certain, more aware. "Did you do this?" she asked, not accusing, just asking, and I did not hesitate. "I made sure the truth had room to show itself," I answered, and that was enough, no need to explain every step, every detail, because she had already seen what mattered. The version of the man sitting across from her was not the one she had dismissed earlier, not the one she thought she could manage with a simple explanation, and the version of herself that walked into this night, confident, unaffected, was not sitting here anymore. Either. We sat there for a moment in silence, not uncomfortable, just final, like a conversation that had already reached its conclusion without needing to be spoken out loud. I stood first, not abruptly, just with purpose. "I am going home," I said, simple, direct, and she nodded again, slower this time, like she understood what that meant beyond the words. I left without looking back, not because I needed to prove anything, but because there was nothing left to prove. The night had already done what it was supposed to do, and as I stepped out into the cool air, the city lights reflecting off the pavement, I realized something I had not felt in a long time, not anger, not relief, just clarity, the kind that does not ask for explanations, does not wait for apologies, it just moves forward, steady and certain, like it should have all along.